Thank you. Mr. Waxman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to address this question to Undersecretary Dominguez. There have been reports about soldiers who, despite physical or mental health problems and against the advice of their doctors, have been ordered to redeploy to Iraq. And we first heard this at our hearing in May 24th, and since then we've received additional reports from soldiers at Fort Benning and Fort Carson. These reports are extremely concerning, disturbing. Do you agree that soldiers who are physically or mentally ill should not be deployed against the wishes of the doctors who are treating them?
Absolutely, sir.
I understand there may be some gray area here. Some soldiers have illnesses that are not severe enough to prevent them from combat duty. Others have mental illnesses that can be successfully treated with medication. In some cases, the soldiers may even want to return to their units. Has DOD put together a policy that governs these redeployments? How do you balance the needs of the soldiers, the unit, and the military as a whole?
Sir, we've given that a great deal of thought in these last several months. That is partly some of the work of the Mental Health Task Force. I'll have to get back to you on the record with the policy that governs this. I do know that they are screened. People are screened before they redeploy. They're screened when they come back, and then again before they go. And people who have conditions that make them, unable or unfit to serve in combat in a combat theater, we have policies and practices in place where they should not be deployed.
Well, under the policies, as I understand it, there's supposed to be a unit commander to have to get a waiver from Central Command before they can redeploy somebody. And we have one documented case, at least, from Fort Carson, where a unit commander sought a waiver to redeploy a soldier who was on psychiatrically limiting medications. The waiver was denied. And then, despite this denial, the soldier was ordered to redeploy and subjected to disciplinary action when he could not. This seems to me like a clear violation of DOD policy. It was bad for the soldier, unquestionably. It couldn't have been good for the unit either. If a soldier is not well enough to be in combat, he could present a real danger to his comrades. Can you explain why it appears that DOD policy is not being followed with regard to redeployments of mentally ill soldiers at Fort Carson?
No, sir. I'm not familiar with that particular case.
Could you tell us what steps DOD is taking to ensure that the policies are followed? Are unit commanders who do not follow the policy subject to disciplinary action?
Sir, unit commanders who don't follow DOD policies yes, are subject to disciplinary action.
I know the military is greatly strained. We have people who have been back in redeployments sometimes 3 or 4 times. But if we're going to redeploy people, at least we ought to make sure that they're well enough to be in a combat zone. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is there are also credible reports of systemic problems at Fort Carson with regard to wrongful discharges of soldiers with psychiatric conditions. The military comes back and says, well, they have a pre-existing condition, and therefore they're not going to take care of them. They don't accept that this is a mental illness problem related to combat. NPR reported on a memo from the Director of Mental Health at Evans Army Community Hospital, and according to reports, this memo was written to help commanders deal with soldiers with emotional problems. Then NPR stated, we can't fix every soldier, and neither can you. Everyone in life beyond babies, the insane, and the demented, mentally retarded, have to be held accountable for what they do in life. The memo goes on to urge commanders, and I quote, get rid of the dead wood. Are you familiar with that memo?
No, sir, I'm not.
Well, it appears this memo is advocating giving up on some of our mentally ill soldiers. It's certainly not a responsible approach. And this business of pre-existing conditions discharge, it means that the soldiers discharged dishonorably and they can't get access to health care that they require from the Veterans Administration. This certainly doesn't make sense to me. It seems like if a soldier was healthy enough to be accepted into the Army, disciplinary problems that appear to be related to PTSD should not be blamed on pre-existing conditions. These soldiers should receive treatment, not blame. I'd like to get further reports from you on this issue. It's certainly not appropriate to discharge soldiers with PTSD through this via this pre-existing condition discharge. And I'd like to get from you, for the record, because my time is up, but I think we need to get this, the DOD policies that prevent soldiers from being inappropriately discharged for pre-existing conditions. If this is going on, it's certainly an outrage.
I'm happy to provide that. If I might, I do want to call attention to Secretary Guerin and Chief of Staff General Casey's efforts to train the Army on the challenges of combat stress. So that very recently they initiated, and if you haven't seen the or heard about the activity they initiated, and General Schoomaker can tell you a lot more, superb effort of leaders to make sure that leaders throughout the Army understand challenges of combat stress and how to deal with them. I think that was it's a laudable, commendable, superb effort by those two.
Well, it doesn't seem to be getting through to the leaders at Fort Carson, so I think we need further reports on whether the Army is actually getting educated or whether more paper is just being generated.
Happy to do that, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Dominguez, then we'll expect some report back on those particular incidents that Chairman Waxman discussed in a reasonable time, and we'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Happy to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Turner.